Yo, what's up? It's your boy E.T. Welcome to another edition of Mass Impact, the educational podcast. Now, look, the reason why I started this, I truly believe that education is the way to close the gap, the wealth gap, the digital divide gap, the opportunity gap. Look, the American dream gap. Can I be honest? Everybody's not experiencing the American dream in the way it's supposed to be experienced. So the reason why we started the Mass Impact, the educational podcast, is to close that gap. Now look, mass is simple. It means motivate, actionable steps, which means what? We're going to give you strategies every week. So we're not just going to motivate you and inspire you, which is important, but we're going to give you actionable steps. And look, it's a support system, y'all. Thus Mass. It's your boy E.T. Now you know. Let's go.
Yo, what up? What up? What's up? It's your boy E.T. with Mass Impact, man, where, look, we are here to motivate you, all right? Look, motivation is step one, and it's so critical. But we need action steps, and we need support. Especially, we need a support system in this day and age more than we probably needed in a long time, all right? So I brought the crew here. We're going to move the needle. And we're not going to just deal with the problems. We're going to address the problems with some real solutions. That's what we do every single episode. And not to mention, we are literally here for you, your school, whatever. Now, I got to tell y'all, today is the day of the book release. You. Today we make history and make a run for the New York Best Time Sellers list, Wall Street Journal's list, all the lists and lists. Amazon, just all the lists. So do me a favor, if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast for free, it's a small $20-some investment, to show you love, okay? So with that being said, Katie, talk to me. What's our topic for today?
Yeah, we have been in a series about literacy. We've been talking about encouraging readers and writers, and specifically we're going to jump in and talk about culturally relevant text today and books, and how we're choosing books for our classroom and our kids that help kids to see themselves and see others in the world. And so I'm excited about this topic today for sure.
Good. And I hear we have a special guest.
We do. And she's an expert in this topic. I'm excited to have her here. So we're going to bring her in right now, if that's okay. We're going to just jump right in at the beginning. This is my friend Jocelyn. We're so happy she's here.
Hey, Jocelyn.
Hello.
Your bio, Jocelyn.
Hi, Jocelyn.
I don't want to miss any of the points. It's so good. So I'm just going to read it so I can get everybody to be familiar with who you are. Jocelyn helps teachers spark joy during the learning experience by creating an inclusive and welcoming classroom environment for all their students. So this is her specialty. She is the founder and managing director of Custom Teaching Solutions and the host of the Cultured Centered Classroom podcast. She's got over 16 years of experience in education as an educator, speaker, professional development creator, and facilitator. And driven by a passion to see the diverse people of our world feel welcomed, affirmed, and celebrated, she provides training on becoming and remaining culturally competent. As a wife and mother of 5, her goals include squeezing in time for exercise, finding moments of joy each day, and parenting each of her children as unique individuals. So she was telling me a little bit earlier about her background, but she's got a bachelor's in education from Miami University, a master's in education from the University of North Carolina, Pembroke, and she also has a graduate certificate in gifted and talented instruction from the University of North Carolina, Charlotte.
You go, girl.
Welcome. Yes. So happy to have you.
I'll say this has nothing to do with anything, but as I'm looking at her, I'm like, and you guys probably don't even know who this is. Y'all so much younger than me, but Kimphil's mom. She looks just like Kim. Anybody ever told you that before? I'm looking at her like, yo, that's Kimphil's mom, who, by the way, is a multi-millionaire extraordinaire. She literally moved out of whatever city she was in, moved her and Kim to LA, got Kim in commercials. Of course, you guys are too young for the facts of life. But you might have, there was a show later on with Queen Latifah, her, the whole nine. Y'all might be familiar with that show. So, man, good to have you in the building. Let's just start here. What will you tell teachers going back to school who mustered up the strength? Congratulations to all of them who are literally in the classroom. What's the message?
My message is always that they are the most important tool in their teacher toolbox, right? That it is great to have all of the technology, the most amazing books. I mean, behind me, I've got all the books, and in front of me, you can't see it, but I've got all the books, right? I love books. You can have the latest iPads and Chromebooks, but if we as educators are not consistently reflecting on our practices and refining, right, and being just really reflective of how we show up in the classroom, then, it doesn't matter. Like, educators are the ones that make this thing shake.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, I think that's important. I always say when teachers, I feel, don't look at or look from the right perspective, I always have to remind them, you are a pro. Like, you are a pro. Like, you are a professional. You went to school for this, you were trained in this, and you are the most important resource that we have in the schools, especially because, kids matriculate through the school, either from a positive standpoint or maybe not so positive. But teachers are staples. Man, I remember going back to my school and Miss Nunn was still there. It's like I went to college, left college, came back, Miss Lavalis was still there. You know what I'm saying? And so students come and go, but teachers are a major resource, and I like to say a major change agent, as it relates to what we need to see happen, from a day-to-day basis. So before any questions from us, Katie, anything specifically you want to ask?
Yeah.
I don't want to take, you know what I'm saying? I know this is your home. I don't want to take nothing away. I got some questions, but I won't ball hog.
No, I want to jump in right now and talk about classroom libraries, Jocelyn, and I know that you'll help us get into that topic. But I, of course, have encouraged teachers for years to just take inventory of their classroom libraries, just to know what is in them. And parents that are listening, please do this with your books at home too, right? But knowing, what topics do you have? What levels do you have? And so today we're going to specifically talk about what cultures are represented in your classroom libraries. And when your kids are coming back to school this year, or they're already back, right? And they're going and they're browsing books and they're excited about reading, are they seeing books that represent them and help them to feel welcomed and affirmed and all of those things? So we all brought some book recommendations too that we'll jump into eventually, but will you just help lead us into that topic? And what does that look like when you're giving teachers advice on how to make sure that their classroom libraries are the best libraries available for their students?
As I said, right, I love books. So I'm on the same page as you, right? Books are everything. I believe that they are an opportunity for students to just experience new things, whether it is something that they are even familiar with. Even when you read a book about an experience that is similar to yours, people still have their own little nuances and perspective on that thing. So I love to use the work of Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. She talks about windows, mirrors, and map text, right? And sliding glass doors. And those are literally that is the key. When we're auditing our classroom library and we think about every single text, it's okay, well, who is this a window for? Who is this a map for? Who is this a sliding glass door? And for those that are not necessarily familiar with her work, a window text is one where students are able to see into another world. So I'm sitting here as a student in the United States and in whatever state that I live in, but maybe I'm reading a book about a child that lives over in Bangladesh, a child that lives in South Africa, right? And so now I'm able to see into that world. And then our mirror texts are ones where students can see themselves reflected back. And it's not necessarily that everything has to be the same, right? Because although I identify as a Black woman, I read a book about Michelle Obama, who's also a Black woman. She still has some different things, right? But I can see myself reflected in her greatness. And then we've got our sliding glass door text where students are able to really step into, so not just to view, but they are encouraged to actually see themselves living this other experience. And then we've got the map text that help to provide just some guidance on the ways that they can navigate through this life. So those are the ways that I encourage teachers to start thinking about the text in their classrooms.
Yeah, you know,
That's
the
good.
first two books that I read that did that for me. The first one was Dr. Ben Carson, Gifted Hands. You know, and of course I was able to see myself. You know, it was so it was so different. Like I had been accustomed to reading, you know, like books in school. You know, I remember Judy Blume from when I was a child. You know, coming all the way up. You know, the Hardy Boys. You know what I'm saying? Like To Kill a Mockingbird. You know what I'm saying? Like I didn't necessarily like it was reading. I always saw it just as reading. But when I read Gifted Hands and I saw Finkel, I was like, Finkel? Is that like Finkel in Detroit? I like, oh, he from Detroit? You know, and as he started making references to Motown, you know, his father not being in his life. I was like, yo, my father wasn't in my life. But I think the sliding door, I walked into it because he talked about how he struggled academically and what he did to make that shift. And so for me, it was like, oh, okay, as smart as he is, he didn't start there. Okay, he was failing. Oh, okay, that's me. Okay, I can see myself. And the second one, which I don't ever talk about, I don't know why I never talk about this book, but the most prolific, what I would call like hood writer, Nathan McCall, Makes Me Want to Holler. And that book, I was like, yo, like this dude is from the streets, went to prison, but he can write. I was like, whoa, like I understand his writing, but I knew why he made it seem so easy. I knew I couldn't necessarily do it, but I knew I could do it. Like I knew with discipline, I could write like that because I understood what he was saying. And he was able to use like all of the grammar skills, you know, properly, but yet so super down to earth and colloquialism that I was used to. I was like, yo, how did he do this? So those were the two books that literally I saw myself, you know, took me into a different world, sliding door, and like, yo, I want to be a better writer because I like the fact that he used it as a tool to help people. But I could tell, like, yo, he's good. He's good. And so those were the two books that really changed my life. And I hope when I wrote my books, except for one of them I wrote for corporate. The other two, and now the third one, was more for the average human who does not understand the crossover. And that, yo, you don't have to just, you can have both. And neither one has to take away from the other. It's just having a tool belt and not just having a screwdriver in the tool belt. It's a way to have multiple tools so that when you need to do different things, you can pull them out and do what you need to do. So that was phenomenal. I don't know who wants to go next. Talk to me.
Yeah, I could jump in there. I think for me, my experience that will be similar happened later in my education career around high school. Like I had to watch, I had to read Beloved by Toni Morrison. I was in like an AP Lit class. I was the only African American student in that class. And when I say no one understood that book except for me, and so it was one of my first experiences actually, and it wasn't necessarily the extent of the storyline itself. It was a mixture of things. It was the spirituality. It was a lot of the language, and it was just like I understood it as a at the time a Black girl from the South with very deep Christian and Caribbean, like all those kind of things. So all those so that language, the essence of the book just really resonated with me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm really enjoying this part of the class. And then the other book was Their Eyes Are Watching God by
Zora Hurston.
Yeah. So again, it was just language and I was just like, yeah, like I understand this. Like this sounds like my aunties and my cousins. And so I've always been a reader. I always loved lit. I remember as a kid, I don't know if, maybe I'm aging myself. Do you guys remember Book It? Did they do Book It?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like, yeah. So like, I always I was always a reader, but those are the two experiences where I connected culturally with something that I was reading.
Connected. Talk to me. Who's next? Connect. I like that word, LaShanna.
I got a book recommendation, Until the Lion Speaks, right here. It's by Billy Moore. He's a young man who made a mistake. He made a huge mistake and served 20 years of prison time. He was able to get out, rehabilitate himself. And now we work with him. He comes into our circles and have conversations through this book. And we use this book as a curriculum to teach life skills. Not only is he from the area, but he said, hey, I turn my wrong into a right, and so can you. Let's walk through my life and let's talk. Let's ask questions about it. So again, it's this 3-dimensional, right? It's like one thing to read about the book and see yourself in the book and learn about yourself. But it's another thing to bring it so close where the author is now a part of this everyday conversation. So I think like if you can get authors, and some of them will come for free to your schools and share their stories about their book and have those questions ready for your young people chapter by chapter. So I recommend Until the Lion Speaks by Billy Moore. Phenomenal book. Of course, Jump, Larry Miller, our guy, E.T., and I had a chance to moderate a conversation with him, turned his life around, made a mistake, served prison time, and now is the board chair, founding president of Jordan Brand, a multi-billion-dollar company that everybody knows across the world. So it's possible. And, you know, it's important. We got to relate. We got to make sure the content, the context, the literacy relates. And I think that's what draws the young people in.
Sam, talk to me.
So I'm just thinking about what LaShanna shared, right? About how like it took until high school for you to have a book in your school experience that you felt like you could relate to or see yourself in. So I just have a question for Jocelyn. Like, what advice do you have for teachers now as we're like approaching the school year, taking a look at text, like, and really like thinking about LaShanna's experience all the way in high school? So how can teachers disrupt that so that all children have an experience where they can maybe see themselves in their books throughout the course of the year?
And sooner, right? Sooner than high school, right? That's our goal.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also in high school as well.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, that is definitely the goal, right? Because my husband had a very similar experience where he was just kind of like, I'm reading all these books and it's not that they're not good books, but it's kind of like, why am I reading this? Right. And so I tried to always give very simple, actionable steps, right? Because as educators, we have a million things going on and we've got all these other things, right? Parent communication and making sure that we're developing the relationships with our students. And we do want to make sure that we are aware of what our curriculum says. But it is important that like we said, that we're allowing our students to see themselves represented in the classroom in general. So when teachers are thinking about disrupting kind of this very same narrative, I believe that it starts with reflection. So first, I guess the first thing is auditing your classroom library. Like, what do I even have in here? And I wanted to kind of also speak to LaShanna's point about how she was reading these books in English, but how much more impactful would it have been in your experience to have been able to see yourself in texts across disciplines, right? So we often only think about English language arts when we think about books, but there are reading materials in every single subject. So for teachers to first, reflect and challenge themselves and say, how am I making sure that I have these windows, mirrors, maps, sliding glass doors in my math classroom, right? Whether it's posters that are on the wall that talk about different mathematicians that are from across the world, or if it's in a science class where we're talking about different scientists or theories or all of this, how are we bringing in people from all across? And then the other thing is to ask 3 anchor questions. So a lot of the actionable steps that I recommend are based on the works of Zaretta Hammond, right? Dr. Goldie Muhammad, Dr. Oh Lord, see, here I am blanking out with these. It's the 5 children brain that Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings, right? So I've kind of taken all of that research and distilled it down into 3 anchor questions. And those questions are, what might my students learn about themselves? What might my students learn about their peers? And what might my students learn about the world around them? So that's a very good way to start to ask yourself as you're thinking about the resources that you're bringing into the classroom. Because a lot of times teachers say, oh, well, this text is not diverse. Okay, so then what questions can you be asking your students so that they can also think about that? Hey, who's missing from this text? What story is not being represented, right? So it's like, I don't have money to buy new books. Okay, so let's take the books that we have. And if we're talking about To Kill a Mockingbird, right? Okay, when is this story taking place? Who are the main characters? What voices are being are missing because the main characters only look like one thing or only represent one gender identity or one particular age group or whatever. So that's what I would say as far as disrupting.
I just think, if I could just insert for a quick, I think that's so powerful. And it just, one of the things that I was thinking was like, as a kid, especially for me in my environment growing up, you don't really know a lot of times as a kid what you can be until you're exposed to examples that show you what you can be. And so for me, it was like my only real examples of okay, success, unfortunately, was the Cosby Show. So I saw a doctor, I saw a lawyer. So what did I pursue coming out of high school? I was like, oh, I'm gonna major in biochemistry, become a doctor. Then I went to law school like that. So it never occurred to me, because I never saw reading material or anything else that said, oh, African-American women can become engineers, or they can, that kind of thing. I didn't see that until I was moving out of high school into college.
And even entrepreneurs, right? I'm an entrepreneur now, and my children see that, and my nieces and nephews. And so I love to have that conversation with them now, and they're already thinking about how they can start their own businesses. And so as far as a book recommendation in that regard, there's the book, it's called Be Fearless, Dream Like a Kid by Michaela Ulmer, right? And she talks about taking her grandmother's recipe for lemonade and, kind of tweaking it and making it her own. And so now she's got this business, and she's been interviewed on several TV platforms, right? But now children can see, oh, I can be 10, 11, 12 years old and start my own thing.
Yeah, that's good.
I recommend too, this is, I don't have it down, but this is a book called Black Inventors. And when I was in college, they had maybe 30 of them, little small, you can put them in your pocket. And I think one of the things that we have to understand is that reading doesn't have to be a chapter book. Reading doesn't have to be, a 300-page book. I remember Jet when we were little, Ebony, what I'm saying? And you just read articles out of it, just something small size. These little pamphlets that I'm talking about, were phenomenal, because it was like, I didn't know we invented the street light. I didn't know that we invented the GPS system. I didn't know, it's just stuff I didn't know, I didn't know we helped build pretty much the railroads and the streets and the buildings from Florida all the way up to, I didn't know that. And so that empowered me. So one of the things that I think we have to understand as educators, that yes, there has to be scholarly material.
Yeah.
We have to read, it is what it is, right? We want our kids to become critical thinkers. They have to read things that are beyond their reach, that stretch them. But eventually, if you hit a tree 1,000 times in the same spot, it'll come down. But then there also has to be, dessert. Everything can't be Brussels sprouts, in college. I'm saying it has to be some dessert, and so kids can read things that they enjoy, that motivate them, that inspire them, that build their confidence. And I want to say that to our teachers. I think the one thing that, as you mentioned earlier, that teachers are their greatest resource. I believe humans don't believe that they're their greatest resource when they don't trust themselves or have confidence in themselves. That's one of the greatest skills, I think. You can call it soft skill, you can call it whatever you want. But humans that are somewhat confident move through the world one way. Humans that are, healthy, confident, move some way. But people who are super confident, I think about, and again, LaShanna, I don't want to take it in the wrong way. But when I think about Trump, I think about Like, yo, what kind of confidence do you have to not have gone the traditional route? You know, you didn't go to Harvard, you didn't go to Yale. We don't know where you went. Like, we don't know where you went. We don't know what your grades were, but you believe you could be president of the United States of America. Like, that's a lot of confidence. It takes a lot of confidence to go through Harvard and Yale and Princeton and try to become a president. There's only so many spots, you know, but I'm like, yo, people are missing something here. Like, I feel you on the politics, but don't get so caught up on the politics that you fail to realize this person believed that they could become president without any of the natural, like, paths that you go through, and did it. And it has 70 million some plus odd people. Like, yo, this is our guy. You feel me? And I just wish that that would come from reading, and that as educators, we would make that a priority. Yes, I want you to pass the standardized test. Yes, I want you to go to college. But a part of reading should also be about the activation of you as a human, as a person. You believing in yourself. And you're literally using books as tools to become the best you could be. And not just, I got a paper to write, I got a grade to get. Mm-hmm. Reading is so powerful. I think it's one of the single activities that I did that took me from homeless to number one in the world. Like, it's one of the single things that I still do every day, that I could pick up a book. And for me, I want us to read. I want us to have them read so much and believe in reading so much that they have to see themselves as a writer. Mm-hmm. Have no option but to look at reading and go, yo, as conversation is a language, so is writing a language. And just how I in the game talking and speaking, I got to get in the game of writing, because it's just a different. I mean, think about when we do conferences, we need copyright. Like, people have to write. When you do a website, people have to write a bio. So there's a whole world you're missing when you just speak, but you don't write.
Yeah. I love what you said, E, about when we have to have rigor with our text, right? And there are some texts that are going to be a part of our required curriculum that we have to use all the time, but we have to make time for choice reading. So books that kids want to read, and like you called it dessert, but that's what's going to get them to see themselves as readers, right? To be confident readers, and then they will approach all the other text teachers that you want them to read as well. But we've got to get them to open the books. And sometimes I've had conversations with teachers about, like, this is a text, yes, you want them to read, that's great, but what's the point if they never read it? If we just keep using that book over and over and over again because you know it's great and you want them to read it, but they never read it, what's the point? So if you can pause and make time for some choice reading, even if it's just little slivers of time, so that they become readers, then they approach that other text. Maybe you have less time for that required text, but now they're actually reading it, then we get like more bang for our buck, right? So we've got to make time for that choice reading. And I'll share just quickly a couple books that I used with students who would have called themselves non-readers. Of course, they're very smart, brilliant students, but they didn't want to read because they hadn't liked the books in front of them for years and years and years. So The Crossover is one book. I don't know if anybody else is familiar with that, but by Kwame Alexander. And the book is written in prose. So it's written like a rap song is what I would tell my students. And I would always read part of it out loud, which they got a real big kick out of at the beginning of the year. So they could hear it first. And so often kids that would tell me they were not going to read during my required reading time would be like, well, I'll read that book. Do you have more of that one? So I could get that in their hands. And then when they read that book, then they would start to pick up more, right? And even if that type of the text feels unapproachable to some kids, he has a graphic novel version, Kwame Alexander, of The Crossover. So it looks like a comic book, but it's excellent reading. It's fun. Kids can relate to it. But he's a phenomenal writer with a whole, slew of books. So it's kind of like a gateway, right? They start reading one of his books and then they want to read all of the other ones as well. So that's one that my high schoolers really, really loved. I'd say middle school text, but really approachable for a lot of my high schoolers that would want to read it as well. And then The Hate U Give is another one that a lot of my students, and this is a big one. You were just talking about, like, it doesn't have to be 300 pages. This one I believe is like 500 almost. And so students who told me they'd never finished a book before. I mean, they're real honest with me, like, hey, it's high school. I've never finished a book, Ms. Davis. I'll read as much as I need to write the paper or to pass the test, but I'm not reading the whole thing. I would challenge them, to read this book, and they would finish it and finish it fast without me pestering them about it. So when they do that, then they start to pick up the other books, right? So I could go on and on about that forever, but
and what did you do? Like, I want teachers to understand. Now, I'm not reprimanding anybody, but I know oftentimes we use the same stuff because it's less work to do.
Yeah.
So I'm not reprimanding anybody, but the reality is we do stuff for 10 straight years because, like, that's more time for me. I don't have to do my homework, my research. I want to discourage that, right? I want to discourage that, okay? Because even the iPhone is still not the iPhone 4. They're on 13 now. So if technology is advancing, we have to advance more than technology. So, Katie, what would you say? Like, how did you get to the point where you were able to get them to read a book like that?
Yeah, I mean, I will say off the bat, like this experience I'm sharing about was when I was working as a reading specialist. So I did have a little more freedom without a required curriculum that I had to get through. So I want to very much respect the teachers that say, hey, I have XYZ, I have to teach. And in this instance, I had a little more freedom for sure. But I really believe if you just like slivers of time, so just carve out and put what's important first. So if you know that choice reading is going to change things for students, just add 5 minutes to the beginning of every class time, 10 minutes to the beginning of every class time. And then don't feel like you have to be an expert in all of the books, right? There's so many books that I had not read, but I would do first chapter Friday and read the first chapter out loud just to expose them to lots of different options, and know that some kids are going to grab this book and love it, and some kids are not, and that's okay. But giving them a lot of options and carving out just slivers of time for that, I thought was really important.
Because
If I could,
one sliver though would change everything.
For sure.
and just sorry, really quickly about The Hate U Give, that specific book. So when I was a dean of students, we had the school read that book, and the movie was coming out. So I think to your point, that was like huge motivation of reading the book, because then there would be a field trip to go see the movie as well, and then a great discussion. So, just staying up with those types of things, also like current books, movies that are coming out. And because you shared about Angie Thomas, Katie, really quickly, one of her besties, Nick Stone, one of my favorite authors, Dear Martin, is just a book that I'd like to share really quickly. And so I think, like Jocelyn, when we were just speaking about, windows and mirrors, this can be a mirror that is not seen in a lot of books. And so Justice McAllister is the top of his class, captain of the debate team. And in this, he has an encounter with a police officer where he is wrongly accused of something. And so this really goes into his personal experience and just really battling being a high performer, going in top of his class, and then going to a prep school, and then just the different things that he battles in his life experience. And so just wanted to share that quickly as well.
And I do say this because I just think this is so important. We have to change the culture, And somebody was saying to me the other day, when this person doesn't support, I said, I don't know if it's like, I don't know if that's the truth. Like, I don't know if it's kids just don't want to read, they can't read, they're not smart enough. I think sometimes we don't make stuff as attractive as we can.
Sure. Yep.
And it's like, commercials are attractive. Nobody's trying to sell a product on TV without having an attractive person with attractive clothes. Like you go to Louis or Gucci, they just don't have the Louis Vuitton or Gucci bag just sitting on a whatever it is, like a plastic bag. Like I've gone to the store a few times with my wife. The store itself is attractive. I'm not even talking about the purse. The actual store, the glass, whatever paintings they have on the wall, the color schemes, the floors, the guys in the all black. When you come in, everybody in the store is wearing. If it's Gucci, they're wearing that. If it's Louis Prada, it's the stores themselves are attractive. So why is it that one of the most important things on earth, which is education, why are we just serving that on a cold platter? It's like, yo, make it attractive, because it is. Like, it's so attractive. And I think I did my best work, my master's and my PhD, and only because, again, at that time, they made it attractive. They made the connection of professionally and for your life. If you do this, this is going to happen. And I was like, oh, bet. I'm going to make what? I can make that much money? Oh, I can make decisions? Oh, I can make it easier for students of color? Oh, I can take kids on road trips? I'm like, listen to me. If you mean to tell me I can take kids to the Super Bowl, to Dubai, if all I got to do is suffer for 4 years, I'm like, sign me up. I'll take whatever class, whatever. If you're telling me I can like be the next Martin Luther King, Malcolm X in my generation, and all it's going to take me is to go in and get trained, I'm like, sign me up. So they gave me more incentives in advanced degrees than they ever gave me in middle school. Mm-hmm. All we talked about in middle school was I had some MEP tests. That's all we talked about. Like, you got a MEP test, learn these words, make sure you study. That's all I ever heard. I never heard anything about, this could change your life, your family's life. This could break cycles. Like, you could leave a legacy. Nobody ever said that stuff to me. So I just want to say school is, for everybody that's listening, school is great. Teachers talk about it like it's great. Even if things are wrong, still talk about, like, they hear y'all conversation. They hear how y'all talk about school. You don't even sound like you want to be in the building. Like, so why would I want to be in the building if you don't want to be in the building? So we got to just be careful that we create a culture of winning, that we create a culture of champions, that we create a culture of excellence. And when we create that kind of culture, people want to go where winners are. I saw people wearing the Cleveland Cavaliers stuff when LeBron was playing. I never really saw people wearing that before. Golden State. I never saw people wearing Golden State stuff. Everybody wear Golden State now. Why? Because of Steph Curry, because of Draymond Green. So let's make education as important as it is. And then this is why. You're not a superpower forever just because you're a superpower. Like, America won't be great in another 20, 30 years if our education system continues to plummet. We're just not great because we're great. You're great because of what you do. If our babies aren't getting educated and they're not learning, they don't want to go to school and they don't want to learn how to read and write, they don't want to become critical thinkers, it's going to be rough on us, right? So maybe not us. Maybe we won't be here when the change happens. Maybe we will be. I don't know. So I want to do as we always do. We're going to say the best for last. Jocelyn, we're going to say you for last. But guys, give me something, 60 second. What do teachers need to do as we talk about changing the culture through reading, becoming winners through reading, becoming winners as understanding that we're resources, and individually we are great because collectively we're only as deep as the individual. So LaShanna, we'll start with you and let's round robin.
Okay. So I would encourage educators to just think through, like, seriously, what type of literature would you have liked to have seen when you were a kid in the classroom, and implement those materials in your classrooms.
No doubt.
I'll just say, use the power of your local library. So don't let I don't have a budget to increase my classroom library be an excuse. There's a local library everywhere, and they love to serve educators. And if the one that's next door to you doesn't, then go to the next one. But use the power of your local libraries to help you bring text into your classroom that is going to make a powerful difference for your kids.
Yeah. And the author. Try to get the author and the book, as Vondale says. Talk to us, Vondale.
I will also, and this was a question for Jocelyn, so when you come back on, we can talk a little bit more about it. But in terms of engaging the digital learner, right? Like, don't underestimate the power of Kindle, Audible for those auditory learners, because I'll listen to a book all day while I'm driving in the car. So don't be afraid to engage the digital learner. and think about the wave. So the Obama Foundation is about to create the first like all digital library here in Chicago when they build a presidential center. So as I'm thinking about literacy and this current generation that may not pick up this physical book, let's engage them on where they are in the media world.
Mm.
I love that, Vondale. And also know the reading level of your students. Know it.
Yes.
And make sure that you are providing text that is accessible to them and help them grow in their reading levels.
So, oh my goodness, like there's so much that I want to say.
I know.
because all of what you all have said, and I think I'm just going to kind of take it from what you said, ET, about the experience, right? And creating an experience that is fun and exciting and welcoming for your students. And so they when I was teaching 8th grade language arts in North Carolina at the time, in a very small town, my students, I was a first, second, third year teacher, and I was using those texts that, well, this is what's already on the bookshelves, and this is what we have. And honestly, I don't even remember how I got access to this book, but it's called The Bully. And it's about a little boy that's growing up in Philadelphia. And so it's a whole series called the Bluford series. Right. And now, as a first, second, third year teacher, I already don't have a lot of money because,
Yep.
first year teachers don't make a lot of money. And I'm teaching in North Carolina, which is so low down on the salary scale. But I was able to find a way to get more of these books into the classroom. At the time, Scholastic had it on their website and the books were like $1, or you could get the whole series for a couple of dollars. And my students, Katie, like you were talking about, were those books on their reading level? No, they were, going to be far below it, but they were high interest, right? Because you want to have those high interest sometimes that's going to just draw them in.
Yeah.
But I created an experience around that book because in the book, they were talking about Philadelphia cheesesteak. And my students had never had that before. So I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to bring that experience to you. So they each brought in $1 because I didn't want to not make this accessible to them. And of course, it's like, look, if you don't have that $1, you come talk to me. Like, I will make sure that you have it. I talked with the principal, right? And me and the other English teacher. So as long as everybody got through the book, and I think that book is probably, I have it on my shelf down there, but I can't get up. I think it's maybe like 80 pages.
Yeah.
But it was about the experience. The kids were so excited because they got to go to lunch early that day. They all got Philadelphia cheesesteak. We had soda, they had chips, and everybody in the school knew that these 8th graders were going to get to have this experience. So that very next year, right, the rising 8th graders, we want to come to 8th grade because we know that there are experiences that we're going to have in our English class. Right. And then how do we make that even more of an experience by talking to the social studies teacher? Well, can we start to learn a little bit more about Philadelphia and the history? Because, well, we've never been to Pennsylvania. So helping to start to open their eyes to opportunities. Maybe I want to now travel because I've never been outside of my small town. Right. So I think it is about this experience. And Vondale, you talked about digital, right? My children, my own personal children, they have the Alexa, because I want them to be able to listen to books. And every night they listen to audiobooks. They love it. They do also read physical books, but they love to be able to listen to those audiobooks. And I think in this day and age where everything is so digital and technology and interaction, literacy is not just about what can I read on the physical page, right? It's like, how can I engage with different technologies and different platforms? And then, Sam, you were talking about making things accessible. So we do want to know our kids' reading levels. But so, Katie, you shared The Hate You Give. Sam, you shared Dear Martin. And then I would say for even younger readers or students that have maybe a lower reading level, there's a book called Ghost Boys by Jewel Parker Rhodes, right? And then there's a picture book that's called Something Happened in Our Town. So when I'm talking to teachers, I'm like, look, there's a vertical alignment that can happen here where we can build on where our students are so that we're building their knowledge base around a topic. And I just use those because those are the books you all brought. But for so many different books, I had my students read a book about a young girl in Pakistan. Well, we started by reading Malala's picture book about the magic pencil, right?
Yeah.
Because they didn't understand that experience and I needed to give it to them in a digestible way. So my 60-second, I guess, was more than that. But I think for teachers to understand that there are so many resources. There are so many free resources online, the libraries, but pop over to Instagram. Teachers are recommending books all the time and giving little synopsis. I mean, I do that all the time. I'll give a little blurb about what this book is about so that okay, is this something that I even want to invest my time in, right? Because ET, you said we're using the same books over again. Because honestly, as an educator, I don't even know if I'm really going to like this book or my students going to like it. But if I can hear a little blurb about it and I know that it's worth me investing that time, or that I can connect with the author on Instagram, there are ways to make this experience where kids are really going to want to dive in.
Yeah. Now, again, you're a guest. So guests don't follow rules. You get to do whatever you want to do. I do want to ask you this, though, before you leave. Were you always, did you always come in with this mindset? Was that mindset challenged? And you had to just be strong? Or did you develop this mindset of, just not coming in the culture and conforming to the culture?
So I would say that sort of, right? But that it was challenged. I think that my parents did a really great job of, although I didn't necessarily see myself in school represented, that they made sure that I had access to different texts and experiences right through church and other organizations that they connected me to. But even as a teacher, I mean, so typically when I start coaching teachers and working with them, I share this story because I feel like many times, because I'm a Black identifying woman, people think, oh, well, I'm a minority, I'm BIPOC, I don't have to do this work, right? But that's not true. Because when I taught in Red Springs, North Carolina, the majority of my students are part of the Lumbee Native American tribe. And then I also had Black students and I had a lot of Mexican students, very few that identified as white. But when I stood in front of that classroom as a girl that came from Cincinnati, Ohio to Red Springs, North Carolina, they're like, oh, you're a different type of Black, miss. You're different than us. And so that did challenge what I thought about how prepared I was to actually teach this group of students, or some of the texts that I had been introduced to that I thought, oh, well, everyone's read this, right? I'm sure that their parents have. No, I cannot say that for sure. And so when my students started asking me why, I didn't back down, right? Because I think sometimes when we talk about developing critical thinkers, it can be a little bit scary to allow our students to ask why and to push back and to challenge us and say, well, I don't agree with you. Okay, why don't you agree? And so my students kept telling me, we don't see ourselves here, right? Especially as Native Americans, as American Indians, how can I identify a hero? We're not in these textbooks. Everything is told from the standpoint of the colonizer. And so that really made me dig in and say, okay, Jocelyn, it's not just about my Black students and allowing them to see themselves. It's about all of my students seeing themselves and other experiences. And I will say, I am so proud of those students because I'm still connected with a lot of them. Now, I told them, I said, you can leave your small town and you can always come home. They are entrepreneurs. Some of them have PhDs. I mean, because it can be that little blurb of time, right, Katie? That little insert.
Yeah.
Where you help to get their mind percolating and say, what can I do? Who can I be?
Love it. I love it.
That's percolating of the mind. That's a dangerous thing, boy. I tell you. Thank you so much. Of course, Katie, and Sam, they do a phenomenal job of making sure that we have phenomenal guests. And so we hope to circle back. Many of our guests have allowed us to circle back and ask them to come back. They've come back multiple times. So we hope that you will come back. If you read an article or you watch something on the news or you experience something in the classroom, hit Katie up and like, yo, Katie, I got something I think is going to really challenge and help support teachers. We have 52 episodes a year. I promise you. We need all the help and the new voices we could get. So we won't be bringing you in the way we brought you in last time. You'll be family. So you'll just come in, you know what I'm saying, and get started. So again, just thank you for your time. Definitely, I'll be watching this and listening to this again. You've inspired me to talk to both of my children and tell them they need to write a book. My son, 27, just turned 27. My daughter, 24, just finished her master's at Michigan State. And so they both my son worked with Coach Izzo, traveled Final Four, Elite Eight, so they both have some very uncommon experiences. Matter of fact, Jalen's on his way to Tokyo in about 4 or 5 days to do some work around fashion. And so they've had some remarkable experiences. So I'm going to tell them, Jocelyn said, y'all need to write about, y'all stuff. As a father, I got to put y'all in certain positions. So I need you to get a pen and a piece of paper or audio recorder and just give me your top 10 experiences. We'll frame those and figure out how to turn them into a kid's book so we can get them into the classroom. Like you said, my daughter was fortunate. She went to a predominantly white high school. She didn't have any black teachers, and a lot of her experiences prepared her for Michigan State. So she has a unique experience. She didn't go to a black public school. And so there are a lot of kids that have that experience now, so it's like, hey, you need to tell your story and prepare them for the good, the bad that comes along with that. So thank you so much for what you contributed today. As they do in church, you get the last word. At church, when you have a guest pastor, the guest pastor get the last word. And then after that, Brandon, Coach B, we're going to Coach B's office.
Yeah. And Jocelyn, real quick with your last word, tell them where they can find you and listen to your podcast too.
Oh, sure. Well, I just want to say thank you all for allowing me to share this space with you, because every opportunity to hear someone else's story, it just nourishes my soul. Like, I do believe that hearing different stories allows you to create bridges of empathy, right? A lot of times teachers are trying to create a classroom culture where there is empathy. And I believe that starts with stories, whether it's reading a story, listening to someone's story. And so I just encourage educators to jump out there. We're all learning and growing. This is not, there's no finished product. It is an ongoing journey where we are all having missteps and also having some amazing successes. So that's my final word. Again, my name is Jocelynn Hubbard. I am the CEO and founder of Custom Teaching Solutions. So you can find me on my website. I'm also on Instagram. My handle is @ITeachCustom. And then I have a podcast. It's called The Culture Centered Classroom, where I share all kinds of strategies and research and tips on how to create a welcoming and inclusive classroom that affirms, welcomes, and celebrates all of our students through instruction.
I love it. Take it to you, B.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Mass Impact, and welcome to the Principal's Office as we review and recap some of the most impactful points from today's broadcast. Today, we're talking about culturally responsive books, and of course, we had our guest Jocelynn Hubbard on the show today to help us do that. Now, today was a massively impactful discussion. You see what we did there? Massively impactful, massive impact. Anyway, it was a massively impactful discussion about the books that we use in the home, the books that we use in the classroom, and how we can be really intentional about helping all of our children be able to see themselves in the books and learn about others through those same books, right? It's a mirror and it's a window. Those books help kids learn more about themselves and how they view the world, but it also helps them as a window, right? It's the mirror, they're looking at themselves. It's the window, they're looking out at the rest of the world. They're getting that context and the perspective of other people. So it's helping them learn about others all at the same time. So Jocelyn suggested that we use 3 questions when looking for the books that we want to use with our students and kids. Number 1, what can my students learn about themselves? What self-reflection can happen there? How can it increase their own self-concept? What can our students learn about themselves from any given book? Number 2, what can my students learn about others? Again, it's the mirror and the window concept. What can these students gain, how can they gain perspective on the outside world? How can they gain context and understanding of other people, right? So that's question number 2. What can my students learn about others? Number 3, what can my students learn about the world around them? So it's what can they learn about themselves, about others, and the world around them. We've talked before about how books and reading, the purpose of it, broaden the mind. It expands what people understand. Kids get to explore new topics, learn new things, and then they get to integrate that new knowledge into what they already understand, what they already know. It's the same process of learning that we've been taught over and over and over again, but reading makes it come to life. Reading makes it real. So with these 3 questions, it will really help guide you on what books to use for your students in the classroom. Now, E actually shared some books that changed his life and his perspective as a reader and a student for the rest of us. All shared recommendations for books that we use with our students as well. Educators will not want to miss what was said on this show. Why? Because they were giving you tangible titles of these books that you can go pick up tomorrow. At Mass Impact, we always say, yes, we want to give you the inspiration. Yes, we want to give you the community, but we also want to give you tangible tools that you can go use in your classroom tomorrow. Some of these titles that were mentioned in today's episode, these are books that can change the entire course of your year, your school year, just by going and picking up these books and leveraging them in your classroom. So don't miss that discussion. Teachers who care about empowering and loving all students will change the world forever. That's how we ended. And we talked about how these books that we choose can help us all do just that. Speaking of books, today, on the day that this episode releases, September 13th, 2022, one of the best books probably ever is releasing. UOU by Dr. Eric Thomas comes out today. So if you haven't already, make sure that you go to uoubook.com and get your copy. Once you get your copy, you'll be prompted if you want to get bulk copies for your school, for your classroom. And this is one of those books, by the way. I've talked about this before. A lot of people know E.T.'s story. A lot of people know homelessness. A lot of people know Chicago, Detroit, his family situation. They know these things about him. But this book is the first time he's told that story from start to finish and then broken down the principles step by step that got him from there to where he is now, of course, the #1 motivational speaker in the world. So if you haven't already, go to uoubook.com and get your copy right now. Don't wait any longer. Do it right now. This is one of the most impactful books that I personally have ever read, and I cannot wait for you to read it either. And hopefully your students can read it too. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining us again on this episode of Mass Impact, and we will see you on the next one.